Bill of Rights Part 2. So in this discussion and video lecture, we're going to go over the second half of the Bill of Rights. So hopefully you watched the first part and you're using those little memory pegs that are in each slide to help you remember Amendments 1 through 5. So remember, the Bill of Rights were those first 10 amendments that were bundled together, and they were a condition that the Anti-Federalists said had to be met if the states were going to agree to this new Constitution that created a president with lots of powers, a Congress with the power to tax, and a strong court system. They wanted some protection, some civil liberties for the citizens of this country. So think of it this way. Bill of Rights are a list of things that people can do and the government can't do. You want to have church on Tuesday? You can have church on Tuesday. The government can't tell you no. You want to own a handgun? If you're not a criminal, you have no problems with you're not been in trouble with the law, you can have a handgun. You want to start a newspaper? You can do it. The government can't kick in your door and search your house without proper search warrants. So all of these things are part of the Bill of Rights. So today in this talk, for this video, we're going to go over the second half of the Bill of Rights. And each one of these also has a little kind of memory peg that you can use to remember what amendment is what. So remember when we last left off, we talked about the Fifth Amendment. It has to do with the right to remain silent. You don't have to speak in court. You don't have to speak when you're arrested. And you can't be put on trial for the same crime twice. That's called double jeopardy. Remember, all of these amendments are really reactions to things that the colonists had lived through. The British government, the king and parliament had done things to the colonists, and they felt that they were being treated unfairly. So they built in these amendments to prohibit all of the things that they had lived with under the king. So the Fifth Amendment was something they had remembered. People had been arrested and forced to talk. They'd been put on trial twice, 3 times, 4 times for the same crime until the government got finally a guilty verdict. So they built these in to protect citizens. So the Fifth Amendment and now the Sixth Amendment are all about if you are arrested. So the Sixth Amendment is all about a speedy trial. Right? So 6 is speedy. So try to imagine the number 6 rolling down a hill. It's a speedy number. So basically the Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a speedy and public trial. So in the old days, the British might arrest you, throw you in the dungeon, and maybe you'd have a trial in 2 or 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 20 years. You just remain in the dungeon. And it would be in secret. Nobody would know it's happening. So the colonists, the Americans, the early Americans who voted for this Constitution said, we want to be protected from that. We don't want this to happen to us under our new government. Also under the Sixth Amendment, you get an impartial jury. Okay, so if you commit a crime in a town in Indiana, well, you're going to have a trial in that town in Indiana. You also have the right to be informed of what you're being accused of. And you have the right to confront witnesses. And here's an important piece. You have a right to a lawyer, even for the smallest of crimes. So the Sixth Amendment is about if you are arrested, you get a speedy trial, and you get a lawyer. So try to remember 6 is speedy. The Seventh Amendment is perhaps... The Seventh Amendment is more about money. It's not really about someone going to jail. Okay, so let me give you a scenario. If you are outside with your cat, Skittles, and your neighbor backs over Skittles with his car, right, your neighbor's not going to go to jail for running over Skittles. It was an accident. And let's say you go to your neighbor and you say, hey, you squished Skittles. That was a $2,000 cat. Your neighbor could give you money and say, I'm really sorry. Or your neighbor could say, get out of my face. You're a weird cat person. If that happens, I guess you could go to the Seventh Amendment. Because the Seventh Amendment says that you can sue people if it's for more than $20. Now, it's $20 back then would have been a lot more money than $20 today, but we've never changed the amount. So it's still $20. And assuming Skittles was more than $20, which he was, because I'm sure he would only have the best cat, you can sue your neighbor, and a jury would decide whether or not your neighbor owes you money. So I remember this by 7 is heaven if you get your money. Or you might think maybe little Skittles is in cat heaven. Either way, 7 is heaven because you get money. So the Seventh Amendment grants you the right to sue someone for damages. All right, they're not going to go to jail. This isn't about going to jail. It's more about just paying for maybe an injury that you might receive, or someone damages your property. You can sue them, assuming it's for more than $20. So 7 is heaven. The Eighth Amendment is all about excessive bail and no cruel and unusual punishment. So the excessive bail, I don't know if you've studied bail or you know what bail is, but let's say you commit a crime or you're at least arrested for committing a crime. They typically won't have that trial right away. Now, of course, it can't be years and years and years, right? Because that would violate the Sixth Amendment, which would be a speedy trial. So let's just say that it's going to be in 2 months. Well, you can make bail, which means you give the court a little bit of money and they let you go free with the promise that you'll come back for the trial. But let's say you steal a candy bar. They cannot say, okay, you can come back for your trial in 2 months. The bail is $1 million. Right? That would be excessive bail for the crime that you committed. Right? So that's a violation of the Eighth Amendment. Probably the most interesting part of the Eighth Amendment would be that the fact that we outlaw or we find unconstitutional cruel and unusual punishments. Now, there had been so many cruel and unusual punishments in the history of mankind. I mean, burning people at the stake, like Joan of Arc, or putting people on a stockade, or the guillotine. Just a very, very brutal ways to die. You know, the British might tie an arm to one horse, another arm to another horse, a leg to a third horse, and the other leg to the fourth horse, and they all run in different directions, and this rip you apart. Right? That was common, but we had experience with that with the British, and we did not want that part of our government. We didn't want the president saying, "Okay, well, I'm going to burn these people at the stake." So let me give you a scenario. Let's just say Arizona elects a whole bunch of people to the state government and the governor, and they say they're going to crack down on crime. They've got all kinds of laws that they're going to show criminals that this is not the place. Arizona is not the place to commit these crimes. So if you commit a crime, let's say murder or kidnapping or whatever, they're going to dip you in honey and throw you into a pit of scorpions. The voters might love it and clap and say, this is the best law ever because we're going to teach the bad guys not to do this in Arizona. There's a good chance that that law would find its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, most likely, the 9 members of the Supreme Court would look at that and say, I don't really care that the people of Arizona want that law. That law violates the Eighth Amendment of no cruel and unusual punishment. Therefore, the scorpion honey law is unconstitutional. So even if the people want a law, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a law because the law has to fit within the confines of the Constitution and the amendments. So that's what the Supreme Court does. You might think the honey scorpion law is great, but it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the Supreme Court thinks. So laws are struck down all the time because they violate the Constitution or the amendments. So I remember the Eighth Amendment is simple because if I say, wouldn't it be cruel if they ate you? Right, that would be cruel and unusual, right? The Eighth Amendment is all about an unusual punishment. Listen, every right that you have. They understood that. You want to go to Disney World? Do it. You want to become a farmer? Become a farmer. You want to go skydiving? Go skydiving. You want to get a golden retriever puppy? Do it. See, they could never list all of these things. It's just impossible. So the Ninth Amendment covers all of the things that you think about doing and not think about doing all the time. Hey, you want to go to Pennsylvania? You don't need a passport. Go. Anti-federalists wanted to make sure that in this new federal government, there were some, at least one amendment that said that states still have power, and there are things that states and only states can do. Right? So Georgia, Utah, New Hampshire, Ohio, they can do certain things the federal government cannot do. For example, you want to go hunting? Well, you don't get an America hunting license. You get the state of Ohio or the state of California hunting license. You want to drive? Well, you get an Ohio driver's license, not an America driver's license. You want to get married? Well, you get a state of Utah marriage license. You want to become a nurse? Well, the state you live in will determine what you have to be, a lawyer or a beautician. There are so many things that you can interact with the state so much more than you'll ever really interact with the federal government. The state really is going to control a lot of your life. Okay, whatever profession you want to be in, there's a good chance the state that you live in, let's say it's Ohio, will have some kind of requirement to get the license to do that. So if you want to be a teacher, well, the state of Ohio will have to give you a license. If you want to be a doctor or a beautician, the state of Ohio will have to give you that license. The federal government has nothing to do with it. Okay? So the first 10 amendments with the Bill of Rights. Now we've gone over the amendments 6 through 10, so let's just review our memory pegs super quick. The Sixth Amendment is a for $20 or more, so you have the right to have lawsuits sued for money. The Eighth Amendment wouldn't be cool if they ate you. License, hunting license, driver's license, fishing license, you name it, Ohio is probably the one, or whatever state you live in will be the one that gives you the license. Okay, hopefully that helps. Now, you know also the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights.